Hi folks, I am Becky with Enduring Finances. Welcome back to our channel today. We are going to be continuing on with our series of logistics partners and Lime and the future state of that. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about whether it is worth it to become a logistics partner for Lime. Now, we recently talked about Lime transitioning from the traditional issues that they've been using for a few years now to the model of using logistics partners in different areas. The big question with that is not if it's going to impact your area, it is when it is going to impact your area, because they're going to move this forward worldwide in all the different countries that they operate in. And it's going to happen in the next few years, maybe even the next month or so for your location. It just kind of depends. But Lime is going to continue to introduce interchangeable rechargeable batteries for the scooters and the bikes worldwide. So we already established what the basic requirements were to become a logistics partner with Lime, and that is registered as a legal business entity, have general liability insurance, have access to a fleet of vehicles, whatever that looks like, have the ability to manage sub-accounts, to hire people, whether they're independent contractors or traditional employees, and then follow all state and federal laws and regulations. So those are the 5 basic requirements just to get your foot in the door with Lime, which are pretty easy to meet. But we're going to take a step further and look at it on a financial level and more of an in-depth analysis. I think it's important to remember that just because you can start a new business with Lime and meet these requirements does not mean it's the best move for you to make individually. As with any business venture, I would highly recommend that you talk to a business professional, a lawyer, tax, accountant services, and go through and make sure you cover all of your bases in making a smart move. You don't want to jump in and not have your bases covered with that. So let's look at the initial business startup costs for a logistics partner. So depending on your business structure and how you're going to do it, and the rates of insurance premiums on your area, and whether or not you use legal services or have someone that kind of guides and mentors you, the cost is going to vary between $150 to $705 just to get your business up and running off the ground. And that is, again, just depending on the big factor of how much support you get from legal and accountants and all of that things. So you're going to expect to see about $150 at the bare minimum. Keeping your business going after you start it is going to cost a lot more money than that. And one factor that is going to be out of your control on that is whether Lime is using the new Gen 4 interchangeable batteries, or if they're using the older models that require you to physically go and charge the scooters individually. If Lime is using the Gen 4 models, they have the batteries, they can be picked up and dropped off and swiped out from the local Lime warehouses, and it can be a very simple and straightforward process. There's going to be kinks, of course, naturally, but all you're doing is swapping out batteries at location. You're not bringing the scooters physically back and charging them at a warehouse. And so that's going to cut down on the time it takes as far as manual labor to load and unload and to charge and uncharge. Unplug the charger. We'll go with that. So once you have if you have a scooter that needs to be physically charged, it complicates it because you have to have space to charge it, you have to have space to transport it, and you have to have the physical ability to pick it up and move it and do what you need to do with it. And it's going to take longer to load and unload that and line them all up and charge them and wait for charging time, and it just complicates things having to physically charge the scooters themselves. This is one thing that is unfortunately out of your control. Lime might be able to give you more information when you're moving through the process on what that looks like for the location and when a potential transition happens, but ultimately your hands are tied. Lime is going to do what Lime going to do, and you're going to have to roll with it. And if you're operating an older model and you transition to a newer model, that's something that's going to impact your business, and you need to be able to adapt to that or set up your business model differently to accommodate that change. Another key factor to really take a look at is your location. I'm in Idaho. We have snowy, cold, icy cold winters, and riding scooters and bikes plummets. People do not want to take those for long drives. It's usually if it's slick and wet and snowy, they're not going to be out as much as possible. So it really cuts down, and most of the scooters were not used. And that's going to go to the same for almost any state that has high levels of snow and ice during the winter. It's going to cut down on the use of these scooters and bikes. Florida, Texas, California might not be as big of a deal. People use them 24/7 all the time, all year round. So you need to really understand how the weather and seasonal change is going to impact your work, because it's going to come down drastically in the year and you need to be able to survive that. And if you have to take 3 or 4 months off every year, or maybe 6 months off every year, you're going to have to go and retain and rehire workers every single year, which is going to add to your business expense long term, regardless of what route you take. Regardless of where you are located and what model of scooter Lime is using, you're going to have to determine if you want to hire independent contractors or traditional employees to do your work. So ultimately, paying your workers is going to be the biggest expense that you're going to see across the board. And Lime leaves this choice up to you. You can hire hourly employees, or you can pay them as individual contractors, independent contractors. So that is up to each logistic partner, courtesy of Lime. Now, independent contractors are self-employed workers who typically cover freelance type work, like the juicers that we've been seeing. They have a set task to complete, but they have the ability to make decisions on how they complete that task. Generally, contractors are cheaper for a company to use because they're not paid as employees are, especially if it's a larger company, because the larger the company, the more benefits and legal obligations the company faces with traditional employees. But with independent contractors, they have a set rate, they do the task, they get money, and they handle taxes and all of their benefits and all things on their own. Having traditional employees, however, means that you can have a schedule set up where you can ensure that tasks are getting done and completed when it's best for your business and when the hours are the most peak of use. This allows for a reliable business process and as a safety net as far as task completion and not having to worry about people not wanting to do certain scooters or certain areas or certain days and times, all of that. But having traditional employees complicates the management side of the business, because you're going to have to handle scheduling conflicts and last minute call outs and just staffing issues across the board, and the work's still got to get done and you have to pay them, and overtime is a very big thing. So it makes paying employees a lot more complicated than paying contractors. With employees, the company has to pay for the employer portion of taxes, which is 7.65% of their base pay. You have to follow the Fair Labor Standards Act. For federal minimum wage is $7.25, and then at least time and a half for overtime, which depending on what state you're at can be 8 hours or 12 hours a day. It just kind of depends on that. So generally, the true cost for a traditional employee is about 1.25 to 1.4 times the base salary. So you almost overtime for them. So if $7.25 is the minimum wage, that would really make it about $9.06 or about $10.15 an hour, depending on the benefits in each state. How does the scheduling between employees and contractors and their pay impact logistics partners? So let's say that there are 25 scooters that need to be charged or have their batteries swapped up. It's universal. With a contractor, they're going to go out, maybe they only choose to do 10 of those because they only have this much time and they do 10 and then they call it a day. You can't force them to do the additional 15 unless that's specified in a specific contract, and then it's going to vary. And that still leaves those 15 scooters that need to be taken care of that either another contractor will need to go out and do or you will need to go to do to meet Lime's obligations. With an employee, if they're scheduled to work and they have enough time to get all of those 25 tasks, all those 25 scooters done, they're going to have to do it, or else they could lose their job. It's essentially like, you do this or you don't get paid, which is pretty straightforward, but we can flip it because this is where it gets a little bit complicated. Your employee might only be scheduled to work 4 hours and they get their work done in 3 hours. Are you going to pay them for the additional hour that they were scheduled to work even though there's no work for them to do? Or are you going to send them home? You're going to cut their check? That's going to complicate things. Or on the flip side of that, what if you have an employee that's scheduled to work 8 hours, there's no one else that can work, and it takes them 9 hours to complete what they need to do? Well, now you're looking at 8 hours of regular pay pay, and then an hour of overtime on top of that. So it's going to impact your figures on that as well. And regardless of how efficient your workers might be or how inefficient they could be, you're required to pay them for time worked. So you can't just be like, I'm not going to pay you for that last hour. You are required to pay them for time that they are on the clock. And if they work an hour of overtime, you have to pay them an hour overtime. And that's why contractors can be very appealing, because you don't have to worry so much about the scheduling and the daily numbers and tracking overtime and labor laws in that regard. So the pay concerns are not the same with the two. But you need to keep in mind that you cannot hire independent contractors and treat them like employees. And Lime already is right on the edge of crossing that boundary. That's why in California they can't have independent contractors doing juicing for Lime, because they crossed over their state laws of what was legal in that regard. So you can't have an independent contractor and tell them they're going to work 8 hours and define and give them very specific responsibilities, because then they are no longer an independent contractor. They are an employee and they get paid differently. So you, as a logistics partner, need to be aware of that, and each state has different little things that go into that, and so you have to be aware of that, and you have to make sure that you're treating your workers, whatever area they are, the right way. Regardless of what path you take, whether it's employees or independent contractors, you're going to run the risk of hiring too many or too few workers to get the work done. You're going to have to consistently evaluate the market, how many other logistics partners might there be, how many scooters are in the market, how many scooters are being used or need to be charged every single day. And it's going to be a balancing act for the entire time you're operating as a logistics partner. And if you hire too many, you're going to run the risk, especially with independent contractors, of them not being satisfied with making enough money. There's not going to be good enough routes for them to select, to take, to earn a good enough profit for them to do the work, and so they might just choose not to do the work. And if you hire too few employees, you're going to run the risk of overtime, and vice versa. You might have too many employees and not enough work to do, and then you're stuck with unhappy employees because their hours are either getting cut or they're just sitting around doing nothing, waiting for work. So it's going to be a balancing act regardless of that, and you're really going to have to adjust to your specific market and the needs of that market. So besides scheduling and the basic pay for your workers, there are still some factors that you're going to have to consider. If Lime is operating the older models, do you want your business to maintain a warehouse for the workers to charge those scooters at? Because you're required to provide your employees, traditional employees, all the things they need to do their job. And on top of that, if you use those traditional employees, are you going to build up a fleet of vehicles for them to use? Are you going to rent out vans for them to use? Are you going to reimburse them for the mileage they're putting on their vehicles? Those are all big factors that impact the decision between contractors and employees and your bottom line. So really quickly, we'll go over a warehouse or not warehouse. Some logistics partners do operate a personal business warehouse. However, I would highly recommend avoiding one if at all possible, unless you own it outright, especially if you live in a colder snow or winter area like Idaho. When there's no demand for scooters, you're still going to have to make rent or at least pay taxes on that warehouse, even if it's not being used. So I would say avoid it if you can. And Lime is typically based in areas in cities with annual contracts to work specifically in that city, and we've seen it time and time again where they've lost that contract and they are no longer operating in said city. And if you sign a 3 or 5 year lease on a warehouse and Lime loses their ability to operate in that city, you've lost your job, but you still have to pay for that warehouse, and then you're in financial hardship due to that. So you don't want to be stuck paying rent in a city where you're not able to work. Generally, Lime has its own warehouse in that city that they're going to operate at least the Gen 4, the battery swaps out of. And once Lime does transition, if they're not already in your city, you're not going to need the warehouse to manually charge scooters. You're just going to use that Lime warehouse and eventually hubs to charge those batteries. So once that happens, you don't really need a warehouse at all, and you're just wasting money and potential opportunities with that. So if you can avoid it at all, that would be my personal recommendation. Might not be the best fit for you, might be the best fit for you. Just depends on you and your own business. Next, we're going to be taking a look at business vehicles, renting, owning, or reimbursing mileage. So if you choose to hire traditional employees, you're going to have to provide them those tools and the equipment needed. The chargers, the space to charge, the vehicles to complete their job, anything that they need to do it, you need to provide it for them. And since juicers have typically been using their own personal vehicles to pick up and move scooters, your business is either going to need to provide that transportation, vans or pickups or cars or whatnot, or you're going to have to reimburse them. The reimbursement is going to cover the gas that it's going to take, the repairs and vehicle maintenance, the damage that might be incurred, the depreciation that happens, and insurance that is required for them to operate the vehicle. And this is typically done through a mileage reimbursement or a lump sum payment on top of their base wages. And for the remainder of 2022, IRS bumped it up in the middle of the year to 62.5 cents per mile. And if you're having someone that's driving 50 miles a day to do their job, that's going to add up really, really quickly. So either way, if you provide vehicles or you reimburse them, you're going to have to be able to track the work mileage and have a system in place to inspect the vehicles for damage and just make sure that you're maintaining them with maintenance and all of that work. If you own a business fleet, you're going to have to conduct the routine maintenance and you're going to have insurance that covers them. And you're also going to have to cover the cost of any repairs or legal fees for accidents that happen and vehicles coming off the line because they need to be serviced for a week or so. And if you rent vehicles, then you're going to have to factor in how much money it's going to cost each month to rent the vehicles from a third party. So let's jump out of the generalizations of the different factors and get more of the financial data side of what it would be to be a logistics partner. We've kind of explored the different factors. There's some that we kind of glanced at. There's a lot of things that go into running a business, and we simply can't cover all of them in this video. So let's take a step in and go a little bit more depth on the numbers to determine if it's really worth investing your time and money to start pursuing it, essentially. You need to keep in mind that Lime has the ultimate control in this situation. They control the drop-off and pickup locations, the start times, how many scooters you can pick up or drop off in a certain location. They handle all of that. They have control over that. So you're limited in what you can do. To piggyback off of that, since Lime is so controlling in this situation, the information that I'm going to give and the examples that I'm going to share are not going to be 100% accurate. It's almost impossible for me to give you 100% accurate information because Lime is changing numbers and I'm doing some guesswork here. I'm estimating, I'm trying to make calculated guesses off of information that I've attained and data that I found, and probably not going to be 100% accurate. Say it right here. I'm trying. I'm going to give you an idea, rough estimates, a ballpark of something that you can work with to evaluate on your own to make this business decision. We know that Lime pays various rates for various tasks in various locations. It all depends on where you're at and what you're doing and the time, because they change it almost week to week sometimes. And on top of that, each state is going to have different minimum wages, fuel and maintenance costs, taxes, and there's just a ton of variables that are going to go into this that's going to make it really hard for me to do a broad base. This is what you're going to look at potentially earning. So I'm going to narrow it down to 3 different locations and kind of break it down that way. So first location is going to be Los Angeles, California. Second location is going to be Austin, Texas. Third location is Washington, D.C. And these are cities that I've been able to find some of the most information about, so I can give the most accurate breakdown. Let's take a look-see. Lime pays Logistics Partners a per task rate for each scooter or bike task that is completed, and that's, pick up, retrieve, move, charge, redeploy. All of those things have different rates that Lime is going to pay in certain areas. And then on top of that, Lime also pays out bonuses to Logistics Partners based off of different factors. Some of them I don't know. Some of them are if they get a certain amount done within a certain time period. But they give out bonuses, and these bonuses can be very large and can be a make it or break it for Logistics Partners. 100%. So very limited information, but that's what I've gotten off of it. From what I've seen, the bonuses can be from, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, almost $4,000 a week off of hitting those numbers. But again, limited information. From what I've seen, the more tasks that a logistics partner completes, the more money they make in the bonus. Plain and simple. So, enough on bonuses stuff. Here is what I have as an estimated breakdown for what the pay rates are for the logistics partners in each city. So we have Los Angeles, $2.50 for a battery swap, $5 to move a bike, $5 to move a scooter, $5 to retrieve a scooter, and $3.25 to deploy a scooter. Now they're not doing any charging there, it's all batteries. Washington, D.C., we're going to see $5 for a battery swap, $8.75 to move a bike, $6.25 to move a scooter, $6.25 to retrieve a scooter, and $4.25 to deploy a scooter. And in Austin, Texas, the only city here that is not operating on that Gen 4 models, they don't do battery swaps, they don't have bikes yet, but they're getting $5 to move a scooter, $2.50 to retrieve a scooter, $2.50 to deploy a scooter, and then $6.50 to charge a scooter. Now these rates change almost daily, so it might not be the same right now. So that's how Lime pays per scooter task. How do the logistics partners then turn around and pay their workers from that? So some of them are going to follow right along with Lime's model and have independent contractors that they then pay a per task rate to complete. And others are going to use traditional employees that they pay an hourly rate to work a certain period of time. I think from what I'm seeing, most logistic partners are using independent contractors. And from what I'm seeing, they're taking 20 to 25% off the top from what Lime is giving them and sending the rest to those employees, those independent contractors they're working. Some logistics partners have a warehouse and charge their independent contractors a per task fee for them to charge the scooters if they're still using the scooters in that warehouse. But either way you look at it, whether you're charging them the fee off the top or the fee to use the warehouse, you're still getting that same cut. It just looks a little differently for the independent contractors, those workers that are doing the job. But if you take 20 to 25% off, these would be the breakdowns for how much you would be paying the independent contractors to do the task in the 3 cities. So we're seeing about $2 to $4 round for each one in Los Angeles. We're seeing about $3.50 all the way up to $7 for tasks in Washington, D.C. And then from about $2 to $5.25 in Austin, Texas, just depending on where you're going. And that's how much money they are taking home as an independent contractor per task. Now, it gets a lot more complicated with traditional employees. Each of these 3 cities have different mandated minimum wages that they have to pay. Austin falls under the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Los Angeles has a state minimum wage of $14 an hour, and Washington, D.C. has a minimum wage of $16.10 an hour. And these wages do not include the minimum required benefits that is federally mandated for each employer. So I went ahead and added those in as well, so we can up the minimum wage that you're going to have to pay your employee for Los Angeles to $15.43 an hour, $17.53 an hour in Washington, D.C., and $8.68 an hour in Austin, Texas. And that is you as an employer paying traditional employees minimum wage and minimally required benefits, nothing else. Now that we've looked at the true minimum wage that you're going to be paying, we need to take in consideration the costs for transportation and fuel. And as we talked about earlier, you can provide vehicles or you can reimburse them, and those are your 2 options for this. Let's look at the cost of gas in these cities, because that's going to impact this as well. In order to estimate how much fuel it's going to take, we needed to kind of do some estimation on how many miles an employee was going to travel in a given day. And from this, I looked at it from 2 different sides. The first is swapping out batteries, where you're just loading up batteries and taking them out, and the second is physically handling the scooters and loading and unloading and manually charging. So we're going to go 2 different scenarios with this. When it comes to swapping out batteries, I'm going to estimate that it's going to take about 310 minutes, or about 5.25 hours, to load up, swap out, and unload about 100 batteries or 100 scooters. That's about 2.5 minutes per battery exchange, with an hour of time to load, unload, and travel to and from the last and first scooters. an hour to get there and to get back, and then the rest of the time is the meat and potatoes of changing out the scooters inside the city. So estimating that, we're going to say about 110 miles driven each day per worker that is doing battery swaps. When it comes to handling the older model scooters, I'm going to estimate about 90 minutes to pick up a load of 20 scooters, which is about 3.5 minutes per the scooter, and it allows for 20 minutes of travel time to and from the last and first scooters. Then another hour to redeploy those charged scooters back into the city after you charge them, which would be about 20 scooters in about 2.5 hours, and that's not counting for the actual time for the batteries to charge. So if someone works an 8-hour shift, they would only be able to complete 2 full rounds of this. And depending on how long it takes to charge those scooters, because it varies depending on the chargers and how much battery and space and all that, they could be pushed into working overtime. So 2 rounds, 20 scooters, so 40 scooters total, and about 25 miles per trip. So for 40 scooters, they would be driving about 50 miles per day. And this is estimations that are based off of my personal experience doing scooters and tracking my mileage, and this YouTube video that I'm going to link up where they go and work for a logistics partner in Austin, Texas for a day and document what they have seen. So check that video out if you have questions about it. It's a really good video on what it's like to experience working for a logistics partner for one day. Let's get into the gas prices of it. So the average gas price in Los Angeles, California is $5.63 a gallon. In Washington, D.C., that is $3.80 a gallon. And in Austin, Texas, that is $3.22 a gallon. Now we broke it down here. You can see with 50 and 110 mile estimations on how much they're going to drive in a day. So a little over $14 to $31 a day in Los Angeles, about $9.50 to about $21 a day in Washington, D.C., and about $8 to about $18 a day in Austin, Texas, depending on where you're operating as far as scooters. Let's go ahead and look at the cost of providing a vehicle. So we're looking at gas that you're going to have to pay if they're using a work vehicle, but we have to look at the cost of providing that work vehicle and what avenues that you have to do that. You have a couple of different options. The first is to lease vehicles from a third party that can be used by the employees. Maybe it's U-Haul, maybe it's budget. I looked at a couple of different scenarios of that. The second option that you have is to purchase a fleet of vehicles for your business to use. And you keep in mind, if you own the fleet, you're going to have to cover the additional cost of insurance and maintenance and legal fees to keep all those vehicles on the road and street legal. So we did a little bit of analysis of each city and budget and U-Haul and different truck rentals, and we're going to put an average of $1,500 a month to rent a cargo van. And it could really depend on their availability. Some of the cities, you couldn't rent it for more than 28 days in a row. They didn't have it in availability in some cities. So there's going to be some complications with that, but you're going to have to work out a contract with each company that you're using for that. For this breakdown, we're going to do $1,500 a month to rent one cargo van. Now, if you purchase a van, we're going to say your average vehicle payment, based off research, is going to be $430 a month. Insurance is going to be $142 a month. You're going to pay about $1,200 a year in just maintenance, which is about $100 a month. And then registration will be about $50 every year, so about $4 a month, bringing that total monthly cost to $676 and the daily cost to $22.54. And so we can see right off the bat that owning a vehicle versus renting a vehicle is going to be more cost effective by double. Like, you're going to save twice as much money by purchasing a van than leasing a van. But let's take a look, see if you don't want to buy a van, you don't want to rent a van, what does it look like to reimburse the mileage that your employees are driving? We remember that the IRS standard is 62.5 cents per mile that you're going to have to pay your employee. And if your employee is driving $50 a day manually moving scooters, you're going to have to owe them $31.25 in mileage reimbursement. And if they're driving 110 miles a day doing battery swaps, you're going to owe them $68.75 a day in mileage reimbursement. And I went ahead and broke it down so that we can see it more. If you rent a vehicle versus owning a vehicle versus reimbursing a vehicle in each one of these cities. Now, Texas, it's going to be better if you go ahead and own that vehicle outright. You're going to save money. DC, it gets a little bit hanky-panky with that. Reimbursement can be cheaper than owning a vehicle. And same with California. It just varies by location and how many vehicles you're going to own. And then we'll do a small snippet here because, again, I highly advise you not to get a warehouse if at all possible, unless it's the best case for your business model. I went ahead and did some research on what you're going to see for a potential price for a warehouse rental in each one of these cities. And it's really, really expensive. Real estate right now is just a horrible market to jump into. So if you were to go out and rent these, you're looking at $8,000 a month in Los Angeles, California, almost $8,700 a month in Washington, D.C., and $10,000 a month in Austin, Texas. And I did this estimation based off of the average 8,000 square foot warehouse. You might use less, you might use more, you might have it for something else, but it's just it's a lot. And that's not even covering the utilities that you would need to pay to have electricity and all the things running in these warehouses. So that's just a generalization of an 8,000 square foot warehouse in each of these cities and how much money you're going to spend a month to rent them. So those are the factors that we're going to be evaluating in the situation. There's other factors that might come into play depending on your city and what's going on in your personal business idea. We can't cover all of them because there's just so many different ways and variables and all the things. So now let's look at the numbers. So let's bring all the information and try and get a clearer picture of what it's going to look like. So I went ahead and broke it down from 100 to 200 to 300 scooters or battery swaps a day. And then, because that wasn't good enough, I decided I would look at it in a different light and see what if you had 2 shifts of people working at the same time on one of those days. So we have 3 different scenarios to really work at for the 3 cities. Let's get into it. So we can see the pay rates for Los Angeles, Washington, and Austin are $2.50, $5, and $6.50 per charge. For this, we're only going to be looking at charging scooters and swapping batteries and not the other tasks, just because it's a little less complicated, only looking at one area, and you guys can do the math yourselves on the others and estimations and all of that. So we can see an estimated income for 100 scooters a day as $7,500, $15,000, and $1,500 for those 3 cities, and that's going to be across the board for whatever route you take. That's how much money Lime is going to pay you. As far as operating expenses for contract labor, you're looking at $6,000 for Los Angeles, $12,000 for Washington, D.C., and then $15,750 for Austin, Texas. If you were to use employees instead of independent contractors, the base wage would be $11,000 for Los Angeles, so almost double what it would be for contract labor. $12,600 for Washington, D.C., so a little bit more expensive for Washington, D.C. there, and then $6,200 for Austin, Texas, so more than half, less than half of what you would be paying for contract labor, which is going to be pretty significant moving forward, as Austin, Texas does have a lower minimum wage than any other place. So you're going to make the most amount of money here in Austin, Texas, where you're going to be paying a minimum of $8.68 an hour rather than $17.53 and $15.43 an hour. Across the board, we take off insurance that you're going to have as a company, bringing your total operating expenses between that to a little bit more for contract labor. As far as employees and the different avenues with business vehicles and rental vehicles and reimbursements, we can see across the board that we're going to be adding in the business vehicles. So if you own or leasing 3 different vehicles, you're going to be paying $676 a month on that. If you are renting, you're going to be paying $4,500 a month off that. And then as far as reimbursement goes, you're going to be reimbursing $2,812.50 a month. And then of course it takes into account gas and of course that business insurance, and the more you spend, the more money you don't make. And so we can clearly see that across the board, California is showing red and red and red. So it's a really hard way to do that. And again, before we move on, I did include taxes on here. So we have the income, the operating expenses, the estimated net earnings before taxes. So this is what you're potentially looking at paying taxes on right here. And then of course we added in taxes because we have to take those into account. This is going to be on a lesser spectrum as far as taxes goes. This varies depending on your own individual tax bracket, which I don't know because I'm not you. So we're going to go with an average of 22% tax across the board and just kind of keep it there. As far as state taxes goes, it varies by state. For California, you're looking at about a 1 to 2% tax, and it increases with your tax bracket. So we're going to do a 2% tax across the board. In Washington, it also does the same thing, but it's higher, so you're looking at a 6% tax across the board. And then in Texas, there is no state tax, which is again why you're going to have such good profits in Texas compared to these other two. And then you have, of course, the self-employment tax of 15.3% that is going to come out again out of what you as a logistics partner is going to take home. So that's going to be implied as well, making your taxes anywhere from $800 to $1,300 a month, depending on how much money you are bringing in. And so that, the numbers are not the greatest there, especially in California. If you're doing this, you're only going to make about $600 a month. And then, of course, we had to add in the estimated monthly bonus, and we did just an average bonus across the board of $11,200 a month with that 22% bonus tax added. So you'd be taking home estimated $8,736 a month in bonuses across the board. And that is going to vary, but we're going to keep it at the state number in this whole exercise to kind of see what it looks like. And then we estimated the monthly take-home pay with those bonuses included. And this sheet with all of the different breakdowns between all the different scenarios, having 2 shifts, having 3 employees, having 7 vehicles, is going to be on my website in that post. You can go and download this Excel sheet and take a look at it as much as you want to and look at all the different things. We're going to focus mainly on this total breakdown here, where we really show the differences between the two of them. It gives a very clear picture that California is just not good at all. The only way that you're going to see really any money come in is using independent contractors, especially with those bonuses. That's going to save you. You can make a little bit of money using employees, but then again, it's still, that's only with those bonuses. Washington, D.C. is going to be in that same boat. They have such a high wage that it's going to be hard to compete with that, and so your only real true option is to use independent contractors in Washington, D.C. And then in Austin, Texas, of course, because that wage is minimum wage, you can make more money by having employees and providing them with business vehicles and covering the gas and all that than you could with independent contractors. So you can make a substantial amount of money in Austin, Texas doing this as long as you manage your employees the right way. We're looking without bonuses at $619 for 100 scooters a day, 30 days a month, $1,600 a month in Washington, D.C. And then if you did use 3 employees with 3 business vehicles and gas and all that paid for, you could make about $7,500 a month in Austin, Texas. The more you increase the staff, the more that increases across the board. It is more cost effective for you to hire more people and have them go out at the same time than it is to have less vehicles and have them go out multiple times. Math. With the bonuses, that just jumps up with, that extra $8,600 a month coming in. It just increases the numbers here and takes some of those red margins to green where you could potentially see a return. But then again, we want to remember, you don't want to jump into this anticipating bonuses are going to keep you afloat if you don't get the bonuses. So these are the breakdowns that we're looking at. Again, this is posted on my website. Feel free to take a look at that, and you can screenshot it and look at all these numbers. And yeah, that is the breakdown. The numbers that you're seeing here don't reflect all of the numbers that you're going to see. There's going to be different business expenses that come up, different accidents, different things like that, and you're paying the bare minimum to your employees as hourly employees. Like, you're paying the absolute bare minimum. There's no added on benefits, there's no retirement plans, there's nothing as far as PTO or anything like that off of these numbers. So you're going to struggle to retain quality candidates because of that. So keep that in mind. And the more workers that you hire, the more time and money and effort is going to go into managing those workers and guiding them and helping them. And that goes with independent contractors and traditional employees, because you're going to have to designate who is going where, or pay someone more money to designate who's going to what location in each day as an employee. And traditional contractors, you're going to have to be able to track what work is being done and what still needs to be done, and how many people you might need to bring in to do additional work. So there's always going to be work behind the scenes to keep everything flowing and moving smoothly. And then, of course, Lime doesn't want to trust one person to do big areas like that. If you're the only logistic partner operator in an area, it's going to be really simple for you to be able to navigate this and keep everything, once you get to a steady rhythm, it's going to be easier to maintain in the long run. But Lime is going to have probably more than one logistics partner operating in the same area, and that's really common, and that is going to impact your profit margins and your ability to complete tasks as well. We know, based off of reports that we found, that Lime already has desired to have 6 logistics partners operating in Seattle, Washington. That's going to impact you, and there's nothing you can do to stop Lime from doing that. You might be able to control or attempt to control how many people you have working underneath you, but competing against multiple logistics partners could push you below the bottom line, and it could vary your profit margins month by month drastically, depending on how quick they are to get said scooters. You have to take into consideration that Lime has different scooter numbers, different size of fleets of scooters in different locations. So you could have anywhere from a few hundred scooters in the city to a couple thousand scooters in the same city. It really depends on how big the market is in that area, to how many logistics partners you're going to be competing against, and then how many of those employees you're going to be competing against. So those impact a lot of things. And if you have a logistics partner that's paying more than you are, and your workers find out about it, they're probably going to jump ship and go work for them. So it really can impact you negatively or positively. Maybe you're the best manager there is and they want to work for you. It just depends on that. I guess we'll end it with, should you become a logistics partner? And I can't personally answer this question for you. I don't know your situation. I don't know your ideas with that. But I think if you are already working almost full-time as a juicer, the switch could be really good for you, especially if you have some experience in back business and handling all of the legal stuff that goes with it and all the laws and everything. If you're coming into this outside of juicing and looking for this as like a new business venture, there's going to be a bigger learning curve. Lime can be frustrating. There can be a lack of information and communication across the board, as with any business, but Lime, I've seen a lot of negative comments about it. I think regardless of what way you might be looking at this, you can make money off of being a logistics partner, else nobody would be doing it. It just depends on how you set up and structure your business for each location, for each scenario, for each varying factor that impacts it, and how good you are at doing that. I think you need to make sure that you do a thorough evaluation of all the factors that are going to impact your individual location and your business idea, and make smart and practical decisions based off of what's right for your own business. And keep in mind, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's not one perfect way to do this, and just do the best that you can, and you can make pretty good money. I mean, we're seeing numbers of people making a couple $1,000s a week just off of bonuses for doing this. So you can make a substantial amount of money doing this if you do it the right way, and you're smart, and you're a good manager, and you work really well with your independent contractors or your employees. But I think regardless, it can take more time and energy than you think it will. It could be a good business venture for you to jump into. So I'm going to leave it on that. Hopefully This gives you a little bit of information. I made a post about this on my website where you can go through and look at that Excel sheet and the breakdown and the different scenarios more thoroughly than what this video is going to show you. I'm just going to show you the pictures of it. Feel free to hit me up with any questions or comments or concerns. Leave them down below and I will try my best to answer them the best way that I can. And good luck if this is something you're considering doing.